The wind came down from the mountains like a living thing that night, tearing at the pine roof of Eli Mercer's cabin with fingers made of ice and fury. He sat close to the iron stove, working a three-cornered needle through torn leather, the coffee pot bubbling black and bitter on the stovetop. Outside, the storm had been building since noon, and now it howled through the valley like all the demons of winter had been turned loose at once. His hands moved steady despite the cold that crept through every crack in the logs. 35 winters in Wyoming territory had taught him that complaining about weather was like arguing with stone, pointless and tiring. The leather in his hands was from the bridle that young mare had snapped yesterday when she spooked at a mountain cat's scream. Good leather was too dear to waste, especially with spring still months away. The first knock was so weak he thought it was just another branch hitting the door. The second made him set down his work. No one traveled in weather like this unless death was chasing them, and death usually won such races. He lifted the Winchester from its pegs, checked the load, and moved to the door. "Who's there?" The answer came thin as wire through the wind. A woman's voice, barely holding together. When he pulled open the door, the storm tried to rip it from his hands. The figure on his threshold looked like something the blizzard had tried to bury and failed. Dark blue wool dress frozen stiff as boards, ice in her hair that might have been auburn under all that frost. One hand clutching a small carpet bag like it held the last valuable thing in creation. He didn't ask questions. Questions could wait until after a body was saved from freezing. He grabbed her arm thin even through the frozen wool and pulled her inside. Fighting the door closed behind her. She stood there shaking so hard her teeth made music. Her lips had gone past blue to a color that scared him. He turned his back, pulled his spare flannel shirt from the peg, and held it out behind him. "Change! Now! Wet clothes will kill you faster than a bullet out here." He heard the carpet bag drop, the struggle with frozen buttons. He kept his eyes on the wall, feeding more wood into the stove until it roared. When the rustling stopped, he turned to find her wrapped in his shirt that hung to her knees, her frozen dress in a heap like shed snakeskin. "Blanket," he said, pulling the wool one from his bed. She took it with hands that couldn't quite close right. He guided her to the chair closest to the stove, then turned to the coffee pot. Coffee first, then soup. The cup shook in her hands, but she got it to her lips. Color started creeping back into her face, not much, but enough to tell him she might live through the night. While she drank, he ladled bean soup from the pot that always sat on the back of the stove, thick with salt pork and whatever vegetables hadn't gone soft in the root cellar. She ate like someone who'd forgotten what food was and just remembered. Slow at first, then steady. He let her finish before he asked, "Why are you here?" Her eyes, green as summer sage when they weren't shadowed with exhaustion, met his straight on. "Owen Blackledge brought me from Boston to be his wife. Changed his mind at the crossroads. Said I wasn't suitable for ranch life. Gave me coach fare back east and left me there." Eli knew Owen Blackledge. Owned the biggest spread in the valley. Ran cattle and men with the same heavy hand. Also knew the crossroads 3 miles through killing weather. "You walked from the crossroads in this coach fare." She pulled an envelope from the carpet bag. Fingers still clumsy. "Except there's no coach until the storm passes. If it passes, the station master said maybe a week. Hotel wanted payment in advance. The fare wasn't enough for a room and food both." She didn't cry, didn't beg, just stated facts like reading a bill of sale. Eli respected that. "Mail order bride," he said, not a question. Now I'm just someone who sold everything to buy passage to marry a stranger who took one look and decided against the purchase. The wind screamed louder, shaking the walls. Eli stood, checked the shutters, added another log to the fire. The cattle in the barn would be all right. He'd mucked out and laid fresh straw that morning. Filled the water trough. But this woman... Name's Eli Mercer. This is my place. You're welcome to shelter until the weather breaks. Margaret Doyle. Maggie. She looked around the cabin, one room. Neat as a pin, tools on pegs, rifle over the door, bed in the corner with a trunk at its foot. I can work for my keep, cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden. Nobody's talking about burden. Storm like this. Christian thing is giving shelter. Christian thing, she repeated, something bitter in it. Mr. Blackledge goes to church every Sunday, I'm told. Eli didn't comment on that. Owen's Christianity was between Owen and whatever God would claim him. You take the bed, he said. I'll sleep by the stove. I couldn't. You could and you will. I've slept on harder ground than this floor plenty of times. She stood, still wrapped in the blanket, dignity holding her straight despite everything. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Eli, we're not formal here. He gave her privacy to settle, busying himself banking the fire for the night, checking the door bar, setting things right for morning. When he finally rolled up in his buffalo robe by the stove, he could hear her breathing from the bed, still shaky but steadying out. The storm raged on, trying to tear the roof off, trying to find every crack and weakness. But the cabin held. He'd built it to last, chinked every gap with mud and grass, made it tight as a drum. It would take more than wind to bring it down. Somewhere in the dark, her voice came soft. Why didn't you ask more questions about why he really sent me away? Eli stared at the stove's glow through the grate. Man's reasons are his own, but I know Owen Blackledge. No, he doesn't do anything without profit in mind. Pretty woman from Boston shows up. He sends her packing in a killing storm that's not about you being unsuitable. That's about something else. Silence stretched between them, filled with wind howl and timber creak. You think I'm pretty? Barely a whisper. Think you're alive, he said. In a storm like this, that's what matters. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been crying. He didn't turn to check. Some things a person needed to do alone, even when they weren't. The wind finally started to ease near dawn, though snow still fell thick as wool batting. He rose quiet, rebuilt the fire, started coffee and biscuits. She woke to the smell, sitting up in his bed with his mother's quilt pulled around her shoulders. Storm's breaking, he said without turning from the stove. But it'll be days before the road's clear. I should try to... You should eat breakfast and stop talking foolish. Nobody's traveling anywhere for a while. She came to the table barefoot, still wearing his shirt under the quilt. Her hair, dry now, was the color of chestnuts with threads of copper running through. She'd tried to braid it, but pieces escaped like they had their own mind about proper appearance. They ate without talking biscuits and gravy. Coffee black as midnight. Good food for a cold morning. When they finished, she stood to clear the plates, moving like she'd been doing it all her life. I meant what I said about working, she said, heating water for washing. I won't take charity. Everybody works here. That's just living. She nodded, hands already busy in the wash basin. Eli watched her a moment, the straight set of her spine, the careful way she handled his few dishes, the determination in every movement. Whatever Owen Blackledge had turned away, it wasn't weakness. Through the frost-etched window, he could see snow still falling, gentle now, covering all the sharp edges of the world in white. The barn was a dark smudge, the mountains invisible behind clouds. They were cut off from everything. Might as well be the only two people left in creation. Her breath fogged the glass as she looked out at the buried world. He sat by the stove with the leather and needle again, listening to the roof settle and crack in the cold, aware that his life had just taken a turn as sharp as a switchback trail. Where it led, he couldn't say, but watching her stand at his window, breathing warmth onto cold glass while snow fell like promises or threats outside. He knew there was no going back to yesterday's quiet solitude. The wind picked up again, rattling the door in its frame, reminding them both that winter was far from finished with its say in matters. The letters sat between them on the rough pine table like evidence in a trial. Maggie had pulled them from her carpet bag that morning, after 3 days of snow and careful distance, laying them out with the kind of precision that spoke of education and hurt pride mixed together. "He wrote these over 2 months," she said, her voice steady as her hands weren't. "Promised a good home, respect, a proper wedding come spring. Said he needed a wife who could read and write, help with the ranch accounts." Eli picked up the top letter. Owen Blackledge's heavy script marching across expensive paper. The words were honey-sweet, full of promises about building something together in the territory, about needing a partner, not just a cook and washer. Each letter painted a picture of a man looking for companionship, for someone to share the burden and beauty of frontier life. "My father died in October," Maggie continued, watching Eli read. "Debts took everything: the house in Beacon Hill, the furniture, even Mother's piano. I had enough saved from teaching to eat for maybe a month. Then I saw his advertisement in the Boston Globe." She pulled out another paper, this one printed newspaper. "Prosperous rancher, established holdings, seeks educated woman of good character for matrimony. Must be willing to relocate to Wyoming territory. References required. Proper arrangements guaranteed." You answered. I answered. Sent my references from the school where I taught, from our minister, from Father's business partner who still felt guilty about buying our house for pennies on the dollar. Her laugh had no humor in it. "Mr. Blackledge was very proper. Sent train fare. Told me which trunk to buy. What clothes would be suitable for ranch life. Even sent an extra $20 for incidentals during the journey." Eli set down the letters. Picked up the last piece of paper, newer than the others. Creased sharp, like it had been folded in anger. "This is different paper." "That's what he gave me at the crossroads, after he took one look and decided I wouldn't do." The writing was hasty, barely legal. Agreement terminated due to unsuitability for ranch requirements. Coach fare enclosed for return passage. No further obligation on either party. Owen's signature slashed across the bottom. "Unsuitability," Eli repeated, studying her across the table. Good bones in her face, clear eyes, clean hands that knew work despite their education. Hair pinned proper even after days of storm. "You're plenty suitable for ranch life." "Apparently not." She took the paper back, started to fold it. "Don't." Eli's hand stopped hers. "Keep it flat. Might need it." For what it says, no further obligation. Man who writes sweet letters for 2 months, then turns a woman out in a blizzard. That man's got reasons that aren't on paper. This might matter later. He stood, walked to the stove, poured fresh coffee. The morning light through the window was gray-white. More snow coming. "Tell me exactly what happened at Rollins Station." She accepted the coffee, wrapped her hands around the tin cup. "He was there when I stepped off the train. Took one look, maybe 10 seconds, and his face changed, like he'd ordered beef and got mutton. Didn't even take my trunk off the train. Just handed me that paper and the envelope with coach fare. Told the driver to wait, that I'd be going back east." "He say why?" "Said I was too thin for ranch work, too refined. Said he needed someone sturdier." Eli snorted. "Owen Blackledge has 6 hired hands and a Chinese cook. He doesn't need a wife for heavy work." "Then why?" "That's the question." Eli pulled out his ledger, started making notes. "When did he first write you?" "September 15th. "When were you supposed to marry?" "He said early April, after spring roundup." Eli did some figuring. "Railroads coming through come summer. Northern Pacific's buying up water rights along every creek and river. Man who controls the water controls the price." Maggie's eyes sharpened. "You think this was about land somehow?" "Everything with Owen Blackledge is about land. He's been buying up spreads all along Sweetwater Creek. Problem is, some of us won't sell. Me, the Johnsons upstream, old Tom Garrett downstream. We've got the water locked up between us." "What does that have to do with a mail-order bride?" Eli set down his pencil. "Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Owen's been talking to railroad men, government men. There's been talk about laws changing, about married men having different claim rights. Might be he needed a wife on paper for some deal. Then the deal changed." So I was just paperwork. Don't know for certain, but Owen doesn't spend money without expecting profit. Train fare from Boston, $20 extra, 2 months of letters, that's investment, not romance. She stood abruptly, walked to the window. Outside, his small herd clustered near the barn, breath steaming in the cold. I sold Mother's wedding ring to buy proper dresses for a ranch wife, sold her books, her sewing basket. Everything I couldn't sell, I gave away because I couldn't afford to store it. The pain in her voice was sharp as winter wind. Eli wanted to say something comforting, but comfort built on lies was worse than no comfort at all. I'm a fool, she said to the window. No, you're someone who took a chance when chances were thin on the ground. Nothing foolish about trying to survive. She turned to face him. Why are you helping me, really? Storm brought you to my door. Man would have to be lower than a snake to turn someone out in that weather. That's not all of it. Eli considered his words. My mother came out here as a bride too, not mail order, but might as well have been. Married my father after knowing him 3 weeks because her family needed the bride price. She made a life anyway, made this place something more than just land and cattle. Died of fever when I was 12, but she left her mark on everything here. He gestured around the cabin, the books on the shelf, the rag rug by the bed, curtains on the windows that served no purpose but softness in a hard place. You take the bed again tonight, he said, changing the subject. Storm's not done. I can't keep taking your bed. It's not proper. Proper? He almost smiled. You're worried about proper when you're sheltering from a blizzard in a bachelor's cabin. I still have my reputation to think of. Your reputation is your business, but long as you're under my roof, you'll sleep warm and dry. I've slept by stoves, under stars, in mud and snow. This floor with a buffalo robe is luxury compared to some places I've laid my head. She studied him. You were a trail driver. The cattle drives to Kansas. Did 8 drives to Abilene and Dodge City before I saved enough for this place. Learned to sleep anywhere, eat anything, and judge a man by his actions, not his words. And how do you judge Owen Blackledge? Man who'd cheat at cards if he thought he could get away with it. Man who sees people as either useful or in the way. Man who goes to church on Sunday and foreclosures on Monday. You don't like him. Don't have to like him. Just have to watch him. And right now, I'm watching him close. Because him throwing away a woman like you doesn't make sense unless there's profit in it somewhere. Maggie returned to the table, picked up the letters. Should I burn these? No. Keep them. Keep everything. Paper has a way of mattering when you least expect it. She nodded, packing them carefully back in her bag. Then she pulled out something else, a small wooden spoon, carved with flowers along the handle. This was Mother's. The only thing of hers I kept that wasn't practical. Foolish, I suppose. Eli took the spoon, examined the carving. Fine work, patient work. Not foolish. Sometimes a person needs something beautiful just to remember beauty exists. He handed it back, then pulled out his whittling knife and a piece of pine from the kindling box. Watch. His hands moved sure and quick, shaving away curls of wood. In minutes, he'd roughed out the shape of another spoon. For you, he said, still working. For your coffee. Woman shouldn't have to share spoons with a rough old cowboy. You're not old. 35 winters in Wyoming territory makes a man old in ways that don't show. She watched his hands work the wood, noticed scars across his knuckles, a finger that bent wrong from an old break. Working hands, but gentle on the knife, careful with the wood. I can sew, she said suddenly. I see you've got shirts that need mending, trousers with tears. I can earn my keep that way. All right. And I can make bread. Real bread, not just biscuits. If you have flour and starter. Got flour, no starter. I can make starter. Takes a few days, but then fresh bread whenever you want. He looked up from his carving. You're already planning to stay a few days then. Color rose in her cheeks. I didn't mean I just thought the storm's likely to last a week. Way it's looking. After that, trails won't be clear for another week at least. You're welcome here long as you need. And after that is after that. One thing at a time. He finished the spoon, simple but smooth, and handed it to her. She ran her fingers along it, comparing it to her mother's elaborate carved one. Different kinds of beauty, she said. Different kinds of useful, too. That night, as she settled in his bed again and he rolled up by the stove, she called out soft in the darkness. Eli, what if Owen comes looking for me? Then he'll find you here, safe and warm and protected by law and custom. Man can't throw away something, then claim it back when it suits him. I'm not something to be claimed. No, he agreed. You're not. That's what Owen Blackledge is going to learn if he shows his face here. Outside, the wind picked up again, driving snow against the walls like fists. But inside, the stove glowed warm, and two people who'd been strangers 3 days ago settled into sleep with the kind of careful trust that comes from sharing shelter against storms, both natural and man-made. The rhythm of work settled over them like snow on pine branches, quiet, steady, inevitable. Morning came with Eli breaking ice on the water bucket, Maggie stirring oats on the stove. No discussion needed about who did what. They moved around each other like dancers who'd learned the steps separately but found the same music. Cows need checking, Eli said on the 3rd morning of their shared captivity, looking out at the white-berried world. Pregnant heifers close to her time. I'll come help. You don't need. I need air that doesn't smell like smoke and coffee. And I've seen calving before. Mr. Mercer. Father kept 2 milk cows behind our Boston house until the city passed ordinances against it. He handed her his extra coat, watched it swallow her frame. Boots by the door might fit if you stuff rags in the toes. The path to the barn was a canyon cut through shoulder-high snow. Inside, the animals stood patient in their stalls, breath clouding, hay scattered at their feet. The pregnant heifer stood apart, sides bulging, tail swishing restless. Not today, Eli said, running practiced hands along her flanks. Maybe tomorrow. Maggie held the lantern while he forked fresh hay, her face golden in the light. She's beautiful. She's profitable. Good bloodline. Strong constitution. Her calves will strengthen the whole herd. You can say she's beautiful. It won't break your cowboy code. He glanced at her, caught something like teasing in her eyes. All right, she's beautiful. And profitable. Was that so hard? Harder than breaking a Mustang. She laughed, first real laugh he'd heard from her. Bright as sun on snow. The sound did something to his chest, made it tight and loose at the same time. Back in the cabin, she taught him to bank the fire proper for bread making while her starter bubbled in a crock by the stove. Temperature matters, she explained. Hands sure on the stove damper. Too hot and the crust burns before the inside cooks. Too cool and it never rises right. Like most things, he said. Too much or too little ruins the whole effort. Their hands brushed, reaching for the poker. Both pulled back, then reached again, then stopped. Maggie picked up the poker, adjusted the coals, set it down careful as crystal. Afternoon brought mending. She took his torn shirts without asking, needle flying through fabric while he worked leather at the table. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of small sounds, thread through cloth, knife through hide, wind around corners, fire settling in the stove. You do fine stitching, he observed, watching her turn a collar tear invisible. Mother insisted, said a lady should be able to make beauty from remnants. She held up the shirt. Though I doubt she imagined I'd be mending cowboys' clothes in Wyoming territory. Disappointed. She considered, no, there's something honest about this work. In Boston, I spent hours embroidering pillowcases no one would ever see close enough to admire. Here, this shirt will keep you warm. These stitches will hold against real work. That's worth more than decoration. Evening brought their first real test of proximity. Maggie had heated water for washing, hung a blanket across the corner for privacy. Eli sat with his back turned, reading from his mother's Bible by lamplight, trying not to notice the sounds of water and cloth, the shadow play on the blanket. "Tell me about the cattle drives." Her voice came from behind the blanket. Long days, longer nights, dust in everything: food, water, lungs, rivers to cross that could take a man and horse both if you misjudged the current. "Why did you stop?" "Got tired of moving other men's cattle to make other men rich. Wanted something of my own, even if it was smaller." She emerged in his flannel shirt again, hair loose and damp around her shoulders. He kept his eyes on the Bible, but the words swam like fish in shallow water. "Your turn," she said, settling by the stove with her own mending. "I'll read aloud if you like. My students always said I had a good reading voice." He washed quick and thorough, aware of her on the other side of the blanket. Her voice carried over the splash of water psalms, steady and sure. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters." "A lot of cowboys found religion on the trail," he said, pulling on clean clothes. "Nothing like a stampede and lightning to make a man consider his soul." "Did you find religion?" "Found something. Maybe not what the preachers mean, but something. Watching sunrise over empty country. Seeing the first grass after drought. Delivering a calf in a blizzard and having it live. There's holiness in that if you're looking." Father would have called that paganism. "Your father never watched the Platte River at dawn or heard wolves singing to stars. Church is fine for town folks, but out here, God's got more room to stretch." That night, the temperature dropped so low the nails in the walls popped like gunshots. Eli built the fire high, but cold crept through every crack. He heard her teeth chattering from the bed, trying to muffle the sound in the quilt. "This is foolish," she said into the dark. "You take your bed back. I'll sit by the fire. Neither of us is going to freeze for the sake of propriety." He dragged his buffalo robe to the bed, laid it on top of her quilts. "That'll help. You'll freeze by the stove. Then I'll build it higher." But even with more wood, the cold was winning. By midnight, he was shaking in his blankets, and she'd gone quiet in a way that worried him. "Maggie." "I'm awake." Her voice was small, tight with cold. He made a decision that would have shocked proper society but might keep them both alive. "I'm going to sit on the bed, on top of the covers. Share the buffalo robe. Body heat's better than freezing separate." Silence. Then, "All right." He sat against the headboard, pulled the buffalo robe over both of them. She was a small, warm weight against his side, shaking like a spooked colt. Slowly, carefully, he put his arm around her shoulders, pulled her closer. Just sharing warmth. Just surviving. "Better?" "Yes," barely a whisper. They sat like that, backs against the wall, sharing heat and silence while the cabin creaked and groaned in the cold. Sometimes her head dropped toward his shoulder, caught herself, pulled back. Sometimes his hand tightened on her shoulder when the wind howled extra fierce, like he could protect her from winter itself. Near dawn, the cold eased. She'd finally dozed off, head on his shoulder despite her best efforts to stay proper. He sat still as stone, watching light creep across the floor, aware of every breath she took, every small sound she made in sleep. When she woke, she pulled away quick but not harsh. "Thank you." "We survived. That's what matters." They didn't talk about it as they went through morning chores, but something had shifted. The careful distance was still there, but it was conscious now, chosen rather than assumed. When their hands brushed passing the coffee pot, neither flinched. When she reached around him for the soap, he didn't step away. That afternoon, while she made her first batch of bread with the new starter, he carved her a bread paddle from pine, smooth and balanced. She took it like it was gold, tested the weight, smiled that smile that made his chest do impossible things. "It's perfect. It's functional." Those aren't different things. The bread came out golden, crust crackling, steam rising when she cut it. They ate it with butter and salt. Maybe the best thing he'd ever tasted. Or maybe it was the way she watched him eat it, waiting for approval she didn't need to ask for. "Good bread," he said. "Good, Paddle," she replied. That evening, she found his small collection of books, worn copies of Ivanhoe, Robinson Crusoe, an almanac, a guide to veterinary medicine. "You can read them if you want. You don't mind." Books are meant to be read. She picked up Ivanhoe, fingers gentle on the broken spine. "Mother loved this one. Read it to me when I was small." "My mother, too. Said every boy should know about honor and every girl should know she's worth fighting for." Maggie looked at him long and steady. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was wise enough to make a life out here when most women would have run back east screaming. Maybe I'm not most women." Starting to see that. As she read by lamplight and he cleaned his rifle, the storm finally began to break. The wind died to whispers. The snow fell gentle instead of angry. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, the world would open up again, the trails would clear, decisions would need making. But tonight, in the warm cabin that smelled of fresh bread and coffee, with careful space between them that meant more than closeness might have, they didn't talk about tomorrow. Sometimes the present is gift enough, and planning can wait for daylight. The last thing she said before sleep, "Eli, that heifer, I think tomorrow's her day." "Might be." "Will you teach me to help?" "If you want to learn." "I want to learn everything." He lay by the stove thinking about that everything. It was a big word, bigger than the cabin, bigger maybe than the whole territory. But listening to her breathe in his bed, remembering the weight of her against his shoulder in the killing cold, he thought maybe everything wasn't too much to hope for. The fire crackled. The walls settled. Outside, the world lay buried and waiting under snow. But inside, two people slept warm and separate and aware, dreaming different dreams that were starting to bend toward each other like plants toward light. The horses came down the trail single file, dark shapes against the melting snow. Eli saw them from the barn, where he and Maggie were tending the new calf born just after dawn. Wet and perfect. He knew that big bay in front, knew the silver-studded saddle, knew trouble had finally found its way to his door. "Inside," he told Maggie quiet. "Now." She looked up from the calf, saw his face, didn't argue. Walked steady to the cabin, not running but not dawdling either. Smart woman. Owen Blackledge rode tall in his saddle. Sheriff Amos Hale beside him, two hired men behind. They stopped at the porch where Eli stood waiting, Winchester leaning against the wall within reach but not in hand. No need to escalate what might stay civil. "Eli," Owen said, touching his hat brim like they were meeting at church. "Heard you've been harboring stolen property." "Nothing stolen on my land except maybe the peace you're disturbing." Sheriff Hale shifted uncomfortable in his saddle. "Good man. Amos, but caught between law and Owen's money like a rabbit in a snare. Now, Eli missed her. Blackledge says his bride's gone missing. Says she might be here. Woman came to my door in a killing storm. Christian thing was giving shelter. My bride," Owen repeated, leaning forward. "Bought and paid for. Have the receipts for train fare. Arrangements. Everything. That makes her mine under law." The cabin door opened. Maggie stepped out, back straight as a rifle barrel. She'd changed into her blue wool dress, hair pinned proper, looking like a schoolteacher about to correct bad arithmetic. "I am not property, Mr. Blackledge, not yours or anyone's." Owen's face went red as beef. "I paid—" "You paid train fare. Then you abandoned me at a crossroads in a blizzard with coach fare that wouldn't buy a dog shelter." She pulled out the paper he'd given her. "Your own writing says agreement terminated. No further obligation on either party." Sheriff Hale held out his hand. Maggie walked down, handed him the paper without trembling. The sheriff read it slow. lips moving with the words. Seems clear enough. Owen, you terminated the agreement yourself. That paper's not legal. She coerced me, threatened scandal if I didn't. I never spoke a word of threat. Maggie's voice could have frozen water. You took one look at the station and decided I wouldn't suit. Your exact words were too refined for ranch work. You saying you remember exact words from a week ago? Owen's hired man. Jake Coulter. Spit tobacco juice near Maggie's feet. I'm educated. Mr. Coulter. I remember everything, including how Mr. Blackledge told the station master to hold the eastbound train because the goods weren't as advertised. Eli stepped forward then, putting himself between Maggie and the mounted men. Lady's told her piece. Storm's over. She's free to stay or go as she chooses. She's staying in your cabin. Owen's voice went ugly. Alone, unmarried. What would folks say about that? Folks can say what they like. Won't change the facts. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. Miss Doyle, are you here of your own free will? I am. Anyone forcing you to stay? No one. Anyone taking liberties? Sheriff, Mr. Mercer has been nothing but proper and protective, which is more than I can say for the man who abandoned me to freeze. Owen's hand dropped to his gun belt. Not on the gun, but close. Careful with your words. Woman. Eli's hand found his rifle then, casual as scratching an itch. Careful with your threats. Owen. The moment stretched like wet leather in sun. Jake Coulter's horse danced nervous. The other hired man, young Tommy Bright, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Sheriff Hale broke the tension. Seems to me this is a civil matter, not criminal. Miss Doyle's free to make her choices. Owen, you wrote that paper yourself. Can't unwrite it now because you changed your mind. This isn't over, Owen said, but he was already turning his horse. Woman like that, staying with a man unmarried whole valley will know by sundown. Then they'll know you threw her away first. Eli said mild. Might wonder why a successful rancher would toss aside an educated, capable woman. Might start asking questions about your sudden need for a wife and your sudden change of heart. Owen went still. You threatening me? Mercer. Stating facts, same as you. They locked eyes for a long moment. Then Owen spurred his horse hard, sending snow flying. Jake Coulter followed. But young Tommy touched his hat to Maggie before he went. Sheriff stayed behind. This won't end here, Amos said quiet. Owen's got pride and plans, and you've stepped on both. I've stepped on nothing, just gave shelter in a storm. That's not how he'll tell it. The sheriff looked at Maggie. Ma'am, might be safer if you moved to town. Mrs. Morrison runs a boarding house. Very respectable. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but I'll make my own choices about where I stay. Amos sighed. Aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Figured you'd say that. Just be careful, both of you. Owen Blackledge doesn't like losing, and he surely doesn't like being made to look foolish. After the sheriff left, they stood on the porch watching the riders disappear into the trees. Maggie was shaking now. Delayed reaction to confrontation. You did good, Eli said. Stood your ground like you were born to it. I was terrified. Didn't show. That's what matters. They went inside, and she collapsed in the chair by the stove. He'll make trouble. Probably. Turn the town against us. Some of it, not all. Owen's got money, but money doesn't buy everything. No matter what he thinks. I should leave, save you the trouble. Where would you go? She had no answer for that. He poured coffee, added a splash of whiskey from the bottle he kept for medicinal purposes. She took it, sipped, made a face at the burn. My reputation's ruined now, staying here unmarried. Your reputation's your business. But seems to me reputation's just what other people think. And other people are going to think what they want, regardless. That's a very male view of the world. Maybe. But I've seen plenty of ruined women make good lives once they stopped caring about the opinions of folks who never helped them anyway. She stood, paced to the window. He cut your fence. Eli looked where she pointed. Sure enough, the north fence had been cut clean through. 3 posts worth of wire curled back like a sneer. That's his answer then. Petty harassment. Will you fix it? Tomorrow. No point giving him satisfaction of rushing. That night they ate in silence, both aware that the outside world had forced its way in. The careful balance they'd built was wobbling like a new calf. When it came time for sleeping arrangements, Maggie spoke first. I'll take the floor tonight. No. It's not proper. Me taking your bed while... Proper flew out the window when Owen rode up. You take the bed, I take the floor. Same as before. We know the truth of it. And that's enough. She looked at him long and careful. Why are you doing this, really? He thought about it, wanting to give her truth. My father brought my mother out here with promises. Kept some, broke others. She made the best of it. But I watched her grow old before her time, trying to be what he expected instead of what she was. When she died, he remarried within a month. Needed someone to cook and clean, he said, like she'd been nothing but labor. He added wood to the stove, watched the flames catch. You're not nothing. You're not property. You're a woman who deserves choices, even if the choices are hard ones. If I can give you time to make those choices without Owen or anyone else forcing your hand, then that's what I'll do. And if my choice is to stay... The question hung between them like morning mist. He turned to look at her straight on. Then you stay, long as you want, as whatever you want to be, guest, friend, partner, your choice. And if the town talks, town's been talking about me since I settled here without a wife. Hermit Eli, married to his cattle. Let them add to the story. She smiled then, sad but real. You're not what you seem, Eli Mercer. Neither are you, Maggie Doyle. That night, lying on his buffalo robe by the stove, he heard her crying quiet in his bed, not the broken sobs of defeat, but the steady tears of someone letting go of one life to make room for another. He wanted to comfort her, but sometimes grief needs privacy to do its work. Come morning, they found a dead chicken on the porch, Owen's mark a warning that things could get worse. Eli buried it without comment, but he saw Maggie watching from the window. Saw her jaw set with determination. Teach me to shoot, she said when he came back inside. You sure? If I'm staying, I need to be more than a burden. I need to be useful in all the ways this life demands. He looked at her city woman in a frontier cabin, educated hands ready to learn rough work, scared but not running. All right, he said. We'll start with the rifle, steadier than a pistol. More forgiving for beginners. They spent the afternoon behind the cabin, Eli teaching her to hold the Winchester steady, to squeeze, not pull, to breathe out slow before the shot. She was a quick study, determined to get it right. By evening, she could hit a can at 20 paces 3 times out of 5. Not bad for a Boston schoolteacher, he said. Not bad for anyone, she corrected. And he had to agree. That night, word came from town through young Tommy Bright, who'd snuck away from Owen's ranch. The story was spreading Eli Mercer had stolen Owen's bride, was living in sin, was thumbing his nose at decent society. But, Tommy added, hat in hand, not everyone believes it. Mrs. Doc says any man who'd abandon a woman in a blizzard deserves what he gets. And Reverend Cole says he'll come out to talk to you both, if you're willing. After Tommy left, Maggie and Eli sat by the fire, not talking but thinking hard. The world was pressing in, demanding answers to questions they hadn't asked yet. We could marry, Eli said finally. Stop the talk. Is that what you want? I want you safe. I want you to have choices. Marriage would give you legal protection, respectability. That's not what I asked. He looked at her then. Really looked. No, if we marry, it won't be because Owen Blackledge or anyone else forced it. It'll be because we choose it." She nodded, satisfied. "Then we wait. Let them talk. When we're ready. If we're ready, we'll know." Outside, wind rattled the windows, not fierce like the blizzard, but insistent, reminding them that weather and gossip both had ways of wearing down resistance. But inside, two people who'd been strangers a week ago sat in comfortable silence, building something that might be friendship, might be more, might be nothing but shelter in a storm. Time would tell. Time and choices and the courage to make them. The general store in Sweetwater was quiet when Maggie pushed open the door, but the silence had weight to it. Mrs. Harmon, the proprietress, looked up from her ledger and her mouth went thin as paper. "I need flour, salt, and thread," Maggie said, keeping her voice steady as her hands weren't. Mrs. Harmon moved to fill the order without speaking, but her disapproval filled the space between them thick as molasses. Two other women in the store, Mrs. Garrett and young Mrs. Johnson, turned their backs, studying bolts of cloth like they held the secrets of creation. Only when Maggie reached for her purse did Mrs. Harmon speak. "We don't extend credit to women of uncertain situation. I'm paying cash." "Cash from where, Mr. Mercer's pocket?" Maggie set coins on the counter, silver singing against wood. "From teaching Mrs. Johnson's daughters their letters. Isn't that right? Mrs. Johnson." The young woman flushed red, but nodded. "The girls are doing well." Mrs. Harmon swept the coins into her till like they might be diseased. As Maggie gathered her purchases, someone new entered. Mrs. Dr. Patterson, the doctor's wife, gray-haired and formidable. "Margaret, dear," she said loud enough for all to hear. "I've been meaning to thank you for helping with Tom Garrett's boy when he broke his arm. Your quick thinking saved that child considerable pain." Anyone would have done the same. Mrs. Patterson. No, they wouldn't have. Most would have stood wringing their hands while the boy suffered. She turned to Mrs. Harmon. "I'll take 2 pounds of coffee and a pound of tea. Put it on my account. And add whatever Miss Doyle needs to my bill as well." "That's not necessary," Maggie started. "Nonsense. Christians help each other, don't they, Mrs. Harmon, or is charity only for those deemed worthy by gossip?" The store went silent as a grave. Mrs. Harmon's face mottled purple, but she added Maggie's purchases to the doctor's account. Mrs. Patterson took Maggie's arm, steering her outside. "Don't let them cow you, child. Half these women came west with stories they'd rather forget. The other half married the first man who asked to avoid stories altogether. My reputation is your business, but if you're worried about it, there's a simple solution." She pulled out an envelope. "Telegram came this morning. From Boston." Maggie's hands shook as she opened it. The message was brief. "Father deceased 14 months. No male siblings on record. Claims otherwise are false. Boston City Registrar." "Sheriff Hale asked me to check through medical channels," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Wanted to be sure Owen wasn't telling truth about your family calling you back. He made it up. All of it." "Of course he did. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Maggie could answer, horses thundered down Main Street. Owen Blackledge and 3 men, heading toward the bank. He saw her, touched his hat with a mock courtesy that made her skin crawl. "I should get back," Maggie said. "Eli treating you well?" "Like a perfect gentleman." Mrs. Patterson studied her. "Sometimes a woman doesn't want a perfect gentleman. Sometimes she wants a good man who knows when to be gentle and when to be strong." Mrs. Patterson. "Oh, don't give me scandal face. Child, I've been married 40 years. I know what I'm talking about." She patted Maggie's arm. "You come to tea Tuesday. Bring that needlework you've been doing. Some of the ladies want to learn your technique." Which ladies would lower themselves? The smart ones. The ones who know Owen Blackledge for what he is. More of us than you think. Back at the cabin, Eli was fixing the fence Owen had cut, working steady in the afternoon sun. He looked up when she approached, saw something in her face. "Trouble in town." "Some." She showed him the telegram. "But also this." He read it, jaw tightening. So Owen flat out lied? To everyone. Sheriff, Reverend Cole, anyone who'd listen. Man's getting desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. As if to prove his point, they heard horses approaching. Not Owen this time, Sheriff Hale with Reverend Cole. Eli set down his tools, but didn't reach for his rifle. Afternoon, Eli, Miss Doyle. The sheriff stayed mounted, but the Reverend climbed down, older bones protesting. "Come about the situation," Reverend Cole said straight out. "Owen's been making noise about pressing charges. Says you're harboring a runaway bride, corrupting morals, all manner of accusations." "She's not a bride, runaway or otherwise," Eli said calm. "Owen terminated their agreement himself. Have the paper to prove it." "I know that. Sheriff knows that. But Owen's got Judge Harper's ear, and Harper owes him money. Could make things legal complicated." "What are you suggesting?" Maggie asked. The Reverend looked uncomfortable. "Marriage would solve the immediate problem, make everything proper in the eyes of law and society. Getting married because Owen Blackledge wants to cause trouble isn't proper," Eli said. "It's letting him dictate our lives." "Then what do you propose?" Maggie stepped forward. "I propose we tell the truth, publicly, this Sunday at church, if you'll let me speak." Reverend Cole blinked. "Women don't usually address the congregation. Women don't usually get abandoned in blizzards either. I have the right to defend my name." "Owen won't like it," the sheriff warned. "Owen's likes and dislikes stopped mattering when he left me to freeze." Sunday came cold and bright. The church was fuller than usual. Word had spread that something was happening. Owen sat in his usual front pew, confident as a king. Eli and Maggie sat in the back, her in her mended blue dress, him in his one good shirt. After the sermon, Reverend Cole cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle has asked to address the congregation regarding recent misunderstandings." Owen started to stand, but Judge Harper pulled him down. Maggie walked to the front, back straight, hands steady. "I came to Wyoming Territory in good faith. Answering Mr. Blackledge's advertisement for a wife, I sold everything I owned, left everything I knew, based on his written promises." She held up his letters. Promises of home, family, respect. She told it all, clear and simple. The meeting at the station, the rejection, the crossroads in the storm, the paper terminating their agreement, the telegram proving Owen's lies about her family. "Mr. Mercer saved my life. He's sheltered me with complete propriety, never taking advantage, never asking anything in return. If there's sin in this situation, it's not his or mine." Owen stood then, face red. "You're twisting things." "I'm telling truth. You wrote these letters. You signed this termination. You lied about my family. Those are facts. You're living with him unmarried." "Because you unmarried me first. You can't abandon something, then claim ownership when it suits you." The congregation stirred, whispered. Some faces showed sympathy, others judgment, most just curiosity, misses. Patterson stood up. "I've seen this young woman tend the sick, teach children, work honest labor. That's more Christian than spreading lies." Old Tom Garrett stood next. "Eli Mercer's helped every rancher in this valley one time or another. Never asked payment, never held it over us. Man like that doesn't deserve slander." One by one, others stood. Not everyone, maybe not even most, but enough. The tide was turning. Owen stormed out, Judge Harper trailing. But as the congregation filed out, several women stopped to press Maggie's hand. Men nodded to Eli. Not acceptance exactly, but not condemnation either. That evening, alone in the cabin, Eli brought out a small box. "This was my mother's." Inside lay a thin gold ring, worn smooth with years. "I'm not asking you to wear it, not yet," But I want you to have it, to know it's yours when you're ready. If you're ever ready. Maggie took the ring, held it to the lamplight. It's beautiful. It's simple. Those aren't different things. She put the ring back in the box, set it on the shelf between his books and her sewing basket. When we're ready, she said, if we're ready. That night, a rock came through the window. No note, no need for one. The message was clear. Owen wasn't done. Eli boarded up the window while Maggie swept glass. He's escalating. Let him. Every rock he throws proves I was right to refuse him. You weren't refusing him. He refused you. No. She looked at him steady. He refused who he thought I was, but I'm refusing who he is. There's a difference. The next morning brought unexpected visitors, 5 women from town, including Mrs. Johnson and, surprisingly, Mrs. Harmon. They came with a proposal. We want to hire you. Mrs. Johnson said, to teach our daughters, real education, not just letters and numbers. The town has a school, run by Mr. Blackledge's cousin, who thinks girls only need to learn enough to read recipes. Mrs. Harmon's mouth was still thin, but her eyes had changed. We want better for our daughters. Where would I teach? The church hall, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Reverend Cole agrees. Maggie looked at Eli. He nodded slightly, her choice to make. All right, but I teach all girls who want to learn, regardless of their family's situations. Agreed. Mrs. Johnson said quickly, before Mrs. Harmon could object. After they left, Eli smiled. Teacher again. It's what I know. It's who you are. Difference there too. That evening, as she prepared lessons and he mended harness, snow began to fall again. Not violent like before, but steady, patient, inevitable. Spring will come, he said, watching her work. Always does. And then we'll plant crops, gardens, whatever wants growing. She looked up from her papers. I'd like that, planting things. Outside, Owen Blackledge was probably plotting his next move. The town was still divided, might always be. But inside the cabin, 2 people worked in comfortable silence, building something stronger than reputation, more lasting than gossip. Eli, she said as they prepared for sleep by the stove, her in the bed, the careful distance maintained but warming. Yeah. Thank you for the ring, for the choice, for everything. Nothing to thank. You'd have survived without me. Survived, maybe, but this is more than surviving. Yeah, he agreed. It is. The fire crackled. Snow whispered against walls. And somewhere between waking and sleeping, between winter and spring, between strangers and whatever they were becoming, time moved forward, patient as seasons, certain as sunrise, full of possibilities neither of them could have imagined when she knocked on his door in a blizzard. The ring sat on the shelf, catching firelight, waiting, like spring, like choices, like hope. The cottonwood tree stood alone on the rise above Sweetwater Creek, its branches just starting to show green. Reverend Cole waited beneath it, Bible in hand, while neighbors gathered in a rough semicircle. No church wedding, this Maggie had insisted on open sky and honest ground. She wore her mother's blue dress, mended so many times the thread made its own pattern. Eli stood in his good shirt and clean pants, boots polished to what shine old leather could manage. Between them, the space that had lived in the cabin all winter was about to close. Seems fitting, old Tom Garrett said. Marrying under this tree, Eli's father proposed to his mother right here. Maggie looked at Eli, surprised. He hadn't told her that. Dearly beloved, Reverend Cole began, but the wind carried away half his words. Didn't matter. Everyone knew the shape of the ceremony, the promises being made. Mrs. Patterson had brought wildflowers, early bloomers tough enough for unpredictable spring. Misses. Johnson's daughters scattered petals that the wind caught and spun. Even misses. Harmon had come, standing at the edge like she wasn't sure she belonged but couldn't stay away. "Do you, Eli James Mercer, take this woman?" "I do," clear and certain before the Reverend finished. "Do you, Margaret Rose Doyle?" "I do," just as clear, just as certain. The ring, his mother's ring that had waited on the shelf, slipped onto her finger like it had always belonged there. When Eli kissed her, brief and careful with all these eyes watching, someone whooped. Young Tommy Bright, who'd ridden over despite Owen's threats to fire any hand who attended. They'd strung up cloth pennants between posts, red and yellow and blue scraps that danced in the wind. Tables made of planks and sawhorses held food everyone had brought: venison stew, cornbread, dried apple pie, pickled vegetables from last summer's gardens, poor food by city standards, feast food by frontier measure. Sheriff Hale stood by the creek, watching the hills. No sign of him. "He'll come," Eli said. "Man like Owen can't let this pass without trying to spoil it." "That's why I'm here, and why Tom Garrett's boys are watching the roads." But the afternoon wore on peaceful. Children played by the creek. Women clustered around Maggie, admiring her courage or her dress or her new status. Hard to tell which. Men talked with Eli about spring calving, about the railroad coming through, about anything but the fact that he'd just married Owen Blackledge's cast-off bride. As sun started slanting toward evening, smoke rose from the direction of Eli's ranch. "Fire!" someone shouted. They ran, all of them, men and women and children, toward the black smoke climbing into perfect sky. But it wasn't the cabin, it was the hay barn, flames already eating through the roof. "Bucket line," Eli shouted, but he knew it was already too late for the structure. Now it was about saving what they could and keeping fire from spreading. Maggie organized the women and children into a water brigade from the creek. Men used wet blankets to beat back flames that tried to jump to the tool shed. Eli and Tom Garrett's boys led the panicked horses away from the heat. Then Maggie saw something that made her blood freeze: a line of fire creeping through the dry grass toward the cabin. "Cut a fire break!" she yelled, grabbing a shovel. "Here now." They worked desperate, clearing a strip of earth between the advancing flames and the cabin. Maggie's wedding dress tore on rocks. Her hands blistered on the shovel handle, but she kept digging alongside everyone else. Sheriff Hale rode up hard. "Got one of them Jake Coulter, running toward Owen's place, had a torch still in his hand." The fire hit the fire break and stuttered, searching for fuel that wasn't there. A few spots jumped across, but there were enough people to stamp them out. The barn collapsed in a shower of sparks, but the cabin stood. As folks fought the last of the flames, Owen himself appeared on horseback, sitting calm as Sunday morning. "Shame about your barn. Mercer, these spring winds. Fire can start from anything. Spark from a chimney, sun through glass, or a torch in Jake Coulter's hand." Sheriff Hale said. Owen's smile didn't waver. "Jake Coulter doesn't work for me anymore. Fired him this morning for drinking. What he does on his own time isn't my concern." "Convenient timing." "Isn't it?" Owen looked at Maggie, soot-stained in a ruined wedding dress. "Still sure you chose right, Mrs. Mercer?" She walked straight to him, looked up at his mounted height. "Every burned board proves I chose right. You're so small you have to destroy things to feel big." His face went dark. "Careful, woman. Or what you'll burn something else, spread more lies. You've already done your worst." "Have I?" He leaned down. "Railroad's coming through. They'll need water rights. Man who controls the creek controls everything. Your husband's sitting on gold and too stubborn to sell." "Good thing he married a stubborn woman then." Owen straightened, pulled his horse around. "This isn't over." "Yes," Eli said quiet. "It is." Something in his tone made Owen pause. Eli stood surrounded by neighbors, people who'd fought his fire, saved his home, witnessed his wedding. Not alone anymore, not isolated. "You burned my barn, Owen, but look what grew from the ashes. Community, the very thing you've been trying to prevent. Every move you make brings these people closer together. Old Tom Garrett stepped forward. Been thinking about selling my water rights to you. Blackledge changed my mind. Rather sell to someone who fights fires instead of setting them. Same here, said Johnson. One by one, the small ranchers who'd been wavering declared their positions. Not all of them, Owen still had power, but enough to matter. Owen's face went from red to white to red again. Without another word, he spurred his horse and galloped away, dust rising behind him like smoke. Sheriff Hale took Jake Coulter to jail, though everyone knew Owen would pay his bail come morning. The neighbors stayed until dark, helping clear debris, sharing food someone ran back to get from the wedding tables, making sure no ember remained to rekindle. Mrs. Patterson was last to leave. You did good today, both of you. Fighting that fire, standing up to Owen, that's the kind of thing folks remember. When everyone was gone, Eli and Maggie stood looking at the smoking ruin of the barn. Half their hay for the winter, gone, tools damaged, harnesses burned, a year's work turned to ash. I'm sorry, Maggie said. This happened because of me. This happened because Owen Blackledge is a small man with big ambitions. Would have happened eventually anyway. We can rebuild. We can, but not tonight. He looked at her face smudged, dress destroyed, hands blistered and bleeding. Tonight, we go inside. Tomorrow, we start again. Is that what marriage is, starting again after fires? Sometimes. Sometimes it's preventing fires. Sometimes it's being the one person who stays when everything burns. They went inside, where the cabin stood solid, untouched except for smoke smell. Maggie heated water, washed the soot from her face and hands. Eli did the same. They moved careful around each other, aware that everything had changed with the speaking of vows, the exchange of rings, the public claiming of each other. I should look at your hands, he said. Those blisters need tending. She held them out, letting him clean the wounds, apply salve, wrap them in clean cloth. His touch was gentle but sure. Same hands that delivered calves and mended fences now tending her small hurts. Your mother's dress is ruined. No, it's just got more story in it now. She would have understood. She would have grabbed a shovel too. When they finally lay down in the same bed now, marriage making proper what winter had made necessary, they lay careful, not quite touching but aware of every breath. Was it what you expected? He asked in the darkness. Getting married? I expected organ music and flowers and a white dress I'd never wear again. This was better. Better your wedding ended in a fire. My wedding ended in a community saving our home, in neighbors choosing right over easy, in my husband standing up to the man who tried to destroy us. She turned toward him in the darkness. Yes, it was better. He reached out, found her bandaged hand, held it gentle. Wife, he said, trying out the word. Husband, she replied. Outside, wind moved through the cottonwood's new leaves, carrying away the last smoke from the burned barn. Inside, two people who'd been strangers in a blizzard lay quiet in their marriage bed, hands linked, listening to their home settle around them. We'll need new hay before winter. Eli said practical. We'll manage. We always do. When did it become we? Maggie thought about it. Somewhere between the storm and the fire, between coffee in the morning and mending at night, between choosing to stay and choosing each other. That's a lot of betweens. That's what life is, the space between one thing and another, where the real living happens. He squeezed her hand, careful of the bandages. She squeezed back. The barn was gone, but the cabin stood. Owen Blackledge was angry, but the community was stronger. Their marriage had begun in ashes, but would grow from them, tough as prairie grass, stubborn as cottonwood roots, lasting as the creek that sang them both to sleep. Tomorrow there would be salvage work, rebuilding plans. Owen's next move to anticipate, but tonight, in the dark cabin that smelled of smoke and salvation, Two people held hands across the careful space between them and called it enough. Called it beginning. Called it home. 5 years had a way of changing everything, while changing nothing at all. The cabin had grown 2 rooms added on the back. A proper porch across the front where Emma, 4 years old now, played with cornhusk dolls while her brother Thomas, barely 2, tried to catch grasshoppers in his chubby fists. Maggie stood at the kitchen window, kneading bread dough while watching Eli work with Sam Standing Bear, the Arapaho man who'd taught him about rotating pastures. They were building new fence lines, dividing the land into sections that could rest and recover while others fed the cattle. "Mama, look!" Emma held up a drawing she'd made with charcoal on bark. "It's Papa and the horses." "Beautiful. Sweet pea. We'll hang it with the others." The wall by the door had become a gallery of Emma's art stick figures and animals. The cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. Wobbly letters spelling home across the top of one. Thomas toddled over, arms up. "Mama, up!" She wiped her floury hands and lifted him, settling him on her hip while she shaped loaves. He grabbed for the dough, laughing when she tickled his fingers away. The schoolhouse bell rang in the distance, the real schoolhouse now. Built with community funds after the church hall got too crowded. Maggie taught there 3 days a week, bringing Emma along to sit with the older children. Thomas staying with Mrs. Garrett, who watched little ones for working mothers. Mrs. Mercer. Young Jenny Patterson ran up the path, breathless. "Mama says come quick if you can. Mrs. Johnson's baby's coming early." Maggie set Thomas down, wiped her hands clean. "Emma, watch your brother. Papa's in the near field if you need him." She grabbed the bag she kept ready clean cloths. Herbs from Mrs. Standing Bear. The birthing knowledge she'd gained helping deliver a dozen babies in 5 years. The community had made her their unofficial midwife after she'd helped save the Garrett twins when Doc Patterson was 20 miles away. The Johnson place was chaos when she arrived. 3 other women were there, heating water, keeping the other children occupied. Mrs. Johnson was walking the floor, breathing through contractions. 2 months early," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Maggie examined her with gentle hands, felt the baby's position. "Breech, but we can work with that." For 6 hours, she coached and coaxed, turned and massaged, until finally, a tiny boy slipped into the world, purple and still. Maggie cleared his airways, rubbed his chest, breathed her own air into his lungs until he gasped, coughed, wailed. "Small but strong," she told the exhausted mother. "He'll need extra care, but he's a fighter." Walking home at sunset, she found Eli waiting on the porch, children fed and ready for bed. Heard the Johnson baby came. Boy, early but breathing. "You did good." "We all did good. Takes a village to birth a baby sometimes." After the children were asleep, Emma in her little bed, Thomas in his crib Eli had carved from pine, they sat on the porch watching stars emerge. The ranch spread before them. Fences straight and true. Garden thriving. New barn raised with community help standing where the old one burned. "Letter came while you were gone," Eli said, pulling it from his pocket. "From Owen Blackledge." Maggie stiffened. They hadn't heard from Owen in 2 years, not since he'd lost his lawsuit trying to claim water rights and moved his operation to Montana. She read by lamplight. Owen was back, broke from failed speculation in copper mines, wanting to buy their land at 3 times what it was worth. Railroad money finally came through. Seems like they're planning a spur line through the valley. Our land sits right where the depot would go. 3 times what it's worth is a lot of money. Eli looked at her. "You wanting to sell?" "I'm wanting to know what you think." He was quiet for a long moment, watching moths dance around the lamp. "This land holds our children's footprints. Your garden, my parents' graves, the tree where we married, the creek where Emma caught her first fish. What's that worth?" "Everything." "Then we have our answer." The next morning, Owen himself rode up, older and harder worn, his fine clothes showing patches and mends. Behind him rode a younger man in a city-suit railroad company. By the look, "Eli, Mrs. Mercer." Owen's voice had lost its boom, gone thin at the edges. "This is Mr. Hartley from Northern Pacific. He's prepared to make you a generous offer." "The land's not for sale," Eli said simple. "Don't be a fool. You could buy 3 ranches for what they're offering." "Don't need 3 ranches. This one suits us fine." Hartley stepped forward. "Perhaps if we could discuss terms." "Nothing to discuss." Maggie stood beside Eli. "This is our home, our children's home, not for sale at any price." Owen's face darkened with the old anger. "You always were too proud for your own good." "Not pride, just knowing what matters." Emma came around the corner then, carrying eggs from the henhouse. Thomas toddling behind. She stopped when she saw the strangers, moved closer to her parents. "These your children?" Owen asked, something odd in his voice. "Our daughter, Emma. Our son, Thomas," Eli said, hand protective on Emma's shoulder. Owen looked at them long and strange. "Pretty children. The girl favors her mother." "Thank you," Maggie said, careful, not liking his tone. "Could have been mine. Those children, this land, everything." "No," Maggie said, quiet but firm. "They couldn't have been, because you would have tried to own them instead of love them, control instead of nurture. That's why I'm grateful every day that you left me at that crossroads." Owen's jaw worked like he was chewing bitter words. Finally, he turned his horse. "You'll regret this. Railroad won't ask twice." "Then they won't ask twice." After they left, Emma looked up at her parents. "Who was that man, Mama?" "Someone from long ago. Sweet pea. Nobody important now." But that evening, after the children were asleep, Eli found Maggie crying quietly by the stove. "What's wrong?" Owen was right about one thing. Emma and Thomas could have been his children. If he hadn't rejected me, if you hadn't taken me in. She shuddered. "But he did and I did, and here we are." Eli pulled her close. "Can't live in what-ifs, Maggie. Gotta live in what is." "And what is?" "You're here, I'm here. Our children are safe in their beds. Gardens coming in strong. New calf born yesterday. That's what is." She leaned into his warmth. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between hauling you in from a blizzard and watching you birth the Johnson baby today. Man learns things, living with a remarkable woman." "I'm not remarkable." "You are to me, to Emma and Thomas, to every family you've helped, every child you've taught." He kissed the top of her head. Owen Blackledge had a chance at remarkable and threw it away. His loss became my whole life's gain. The next week brought news the railroad had decided to route through the Northern Valley instead, where Owen had sold them his Montana holdings for pennies on the dollar, desperate for cash. Their land was safe from development, worth only what it had always been worth: a home, a living, a life. "Guess we're staying poor," Eli said when they heard. "Rich in everything that matters," Maggie replied, watching Emma teach Thomas to feed chickens, their laughter bright as morning. The school board met that month, voting to make Maggie the official school teacher with proper salary. Mrs. Harmon, now school board president, made the motion herself. "You've taught our daughters to read and cipher and think," she said. "Even taught some of us mothers along the way. About time we made it official." With the salary came respect, position, belonging. Women who'd once turned their backs now sought Maggie's advice on everything from colicky babies to difficult husbands. One evening, as autumn touched the cottonwoods gold, Sam Standing Bear came by with his wife, bringing traditional cradleboard for Thomas and a doll for Emma. "Your children should know all their neighbors," he said, "all their histories." They shared dinner venison stew, cornbread, wild berries the children had gathered. Stories passed around the table like salt, connecting past to present to future. After the standing bears left, Eli and Maggie tucked their children into bed, Emma insisting on taking her new doll, Thomas clutching the wooden horse Eli had carved. "Tell the story," Emma demanded, "about the storm." So Maggie told it, how she'd knocked on the door in a blizzard, how Papa had let her in, how kindness grew into love. Emma sighed happy at the ending she knew by heart, Thomas already asleep. Out on the porch, Eli and Maggie sat close on the bench he'd built, watching their land settle into night. Cattle lowed in the distance. An owl called from the cottonwood. The creek sang its endless song. "Owen came back," Maggie said. "After all these years, he came back." "And left again. For good this time, I think." "How do you know?" "Man like Owen needs to believe he's winning. Coming here, seeing what we've built, what he threw away, that's a losing he can't bear to repeat." She laced her fingers through his. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if—" "No, this is what happened. You, me, them, this." He gestured at their world. "This is the only story that matters." Inside, Thomas cried out in his sleep. Maggie went to soothe him, came back to report he'd settled. Bad dream. Growing pains. Maybe misses. Standing Bear says children feel growth in their bones at night. We all feel growth in our bones. Eli said, just some of us are better at recognizing it. They sat quiet then. Two people who'd started as strangers, built a marriage from necessity, found love in daily choices, created a family from hope and work and stubborn faith in tomorrow. The moon rose over the mountains, full and bright, silvering everything: the cabin they'd expanded, the barn they'd rebuilt, the school path worn by small feet, the garden fence with Emma's painted flowers, the creek that had seen it all and would see whatever came next. "No regrets?" Eli asked. "Not one," Maggie said. "Well, maybe one." "What's that?" "I wish I'd knocked on your door sooner." He laughed, pulled her closer. "Then we wouldn't have this exact life, these exact children, this exact moment." "You're right." She settled against him. "No regrets then, not even one." Tomorrow there would be chores and teaching, children to raise, community to tend. But tonight, 5 years from a blizzard that changed everything, they sat on their porch and felt the weight of contentment, heavy and sweet as bread from the oven, certain as sunrise, theirs as surely as the land they'd chosen not to sell. The harvest moon hung fat and golden over Sweetwater Valley as the whole community gathered for the schoolhouse raising. The old building had served well, but with 32 children now attending, they needed something bigger. Eli and the other men had spent weeks cutting timber, while Maggie and the women planned every detail down to where the coat hooks would go. Sheriff Hale, gray-haired now and thinking of retirement, hammered boards alongside his replacement, young Deputy William Burns, Reverend Cole, bent with age but still strong in spirit, blessed each beam as it went up, even Mrs. Harmon, past 70 and sharp as winter wind, directed younger women in preparing the noon meal. "Never thought I'd see the day," old Tom Garrett said to Eli, both men taking a breather. "This valley was nothing but scattered ranches and suspicion when you arrived. Now look at us." It was true. The school raising had brought everyone: ranchers, farmers, even the handful of former slaves who'd come west for fresh starts. Sam Standing Bear's sons worked alongside the Johnson boys, cultural division set aside for common purpose. Emma, now 9 and serious as her mother, helped serve water to the workers. Thomas, 7 and all energy, ran messages between the work groups. The Mercer children had grown into the valley's own, claimed by everyone, watching over by all. Mrs. Mercer. A young woman approached Sarah Mills, who'd arrived last spring as another mail-order bride, this time successful. "Mrs. Harmon wants to know about the dedication plaque." Maggie wiped her hands on her apron. "Considering, it should list everyone who contributed, every family, no matter how small their donation. Even the standing bears, especially the standing bears. They donated the land, after all. The young woman nodded and hurried off. Maggie watched her go, remembering her own arrival, frightened and desperate. Sarah had found a gentler welcome, the community having learned something about judgment and acceptance. "Mama," Thomas ran up, breathless. "There's a man coming, fancy carriage and everything." The work slowed as everyone turned to watch the approaching vehicle, black lacquer and brass fittings, pulled by matched grays. It stopped at the schoolhouse site, and a well-dressed man stepped out, followed by someone painfully familiar, Owen Blackledge. But this Owen was different. Thin, stooped, his hair gone white. He leaned on a walking stick, each step careful. "Don't mean trouble," he said, voice barely carrying. "Come to make amends, if such is possible." The well-dressed man, a lawyer from Denver, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackledge wishes to make a donation to the school, substantial enough to buy books, slates, whatever's needed for years to come." Silence stretched taut as fence wire. "Finally." Maggie stepped forward. "Why?" Owen looked at her, and for the first time, she saw regret in his eyes. "I'm dying. Month, maybe 2. Doctor says it's my liver. All that whiskey catching up." He coughed, harsh and wet. "Been thinking about legacies. What a man leaves behind." "You left plenty behind," someone muttered. "Yes," Owen agreed. "Burned barns, cut fences, lies, threats." He looked directly at Maggie. "A good woman in a blizzard." "That was a long time ago." "Not long enough to forget. Not long enough to forgive. Probably. But I'd like to try to balance the scales some." Eli moved to stand beside Maggie. "Money doesn't balance those scales." "No, but maybe it helps children who had nothing to do with my sins. Maybe it buys books that teach them to be better than I was." Reverend Cole stepped forward. "The donation would be accepted by the school board, not any individual. The children would benefit, not you." "That's as it should be." Owen's lawyer produced papers, which Mrs. Harmon, as board president, reviewed with suspicious care. The amount made her eyebrows rise. "This is generous." "It's necessary," Owen said then to Maggie. "I've been married 3 times since Montana. Each wife left when she found out who I really was. No children, thank God. They'd have inherited my poison." "Children inherit what they're taught," Maggie said. "Emma and Thomas know kindness because they've seen it. They know hard work because they live it. You could have taught different lessons." "Could have, didn't." He turned to go, then stopped. "That winter, when I sent you away, it wasn't about you being unsuitable. It was about a land deal that fell through. I needed a wife to secure certain claims. Then the law changed. You were inconvenient." "I know." He looked surprised. "You know? We figured it out years ago. You never did anything without profit motive." "No, I didn't." He looked around the gathering. All these people building something together. "Except this donation, there's no profit in it. Unless you count trying to buy peace before meeting my maker. That's between you and God." Reverend Cole said, "We'll take the money for the children and pray for your soul, as we do for all souls." Owen nodded, climbed painfully back into the carriage before it pulled away. He called out, "Mercer, you were right. Every move I made to break this community made it stronger. Wished I'd learned that lesson sooner." Then he was gone, dust settling in his wake. The work resumed, but the mood had shifted. People spoke quieter, moved gentler, as if reminded that time changed everything, even the hardest hearts. By evening, the schoolhouse frame stood complete. They'd continue tomorrow, and the day after, until it was finished. But tonight, they celebrated. Tables appeared as if by magic, loaded with food. Sam Standing Bear's sons played drums while the Johnson girls danced. Old Tom Garrett pulled out his fiddle, and suddenly there was music lifting into the star-drunk sky. Eli and Maggie stood apart for a moment, watching their children play with others. No divisions of race or wealth or history between them. "Did you forgive him?" Eli asked. "I forgave him years ago. Not for his sake, for mine. Carrying hate is like carrying stones. Eventually, you have to set them down or they'll bury you." "You're a better person than me." "No, just someone who learned that the best revenge is a life well lived." She took his hand. "And this is a very well-lived life." Emma ran up, Thomas behind her. "Papa, Mama, come dance." They let their children pull them into the circle of neighbors, dancing under stars to fiddle and drum, celebrating not just a schoolhouse, but a community built from unlikely beginnings. Later, as families drifted home, Maggie found a moment with Mrs. Harmon. "I owe you an apology," the older woman said. "When you first came, I judged you harsh, thought you were trouble." "I was trouble, just not the kind you thought." "No, you are the kind of trouble that makes people examine themselves. That's harder to forgive than scandal." She pressed something into Maggie's hand, a handkerchief, embroidered with delicate flowers. "This was my daughter's. She died of fever before she could use it at her wedding. I'd like Emma to have it when her time comes." Maggie's eyes filled. "Mrs. Harmon." "Sarah, after all these years. Call me Sarah." As the Mercers drove home in their wagon, children sleeping in the back on hay bales, Eli and Maggie sat close on the bench, her head on his shoulder. "Owen's donation will change everything," she said. "Real books, maps, maybe even a globe. The children will be able to learn about the whole world. But they'll still come home to this valley. Some will, some won't. That's how it should be. We raise them to choose, not to stay. Even Emma and Thomas, especially them. We give them roots so they can grow wings." Eli considered this. "Your father would be proud. You've become the teacher he raised, just in a different classroom." "I hope so." They drove in comfortable silence, the horse knowing the way home. Behind them, their children slept peacefully. Ahead, their cabin waited, lamplight in the window from the fire they'd banked. "Eli? That first night, when I knocked on your door, did you think about turning me away?" "For about 1 second. Then I saw your eyes. Saw someone who wasn't going to quit, no matter how hard things got. Couldn't turn away that kind of strength." "I wasn't strong. I was desperate." "Sometimes they're the same thing." They pulled up to the cabin, Eli carrying Thomas while Maggie guided sleepy Emma. Inside, they tucked their children into bed, each child clutching their favorite toy Emma with her grandmother's handkerchief, now added to her treasures. Thomas with his carved horse. On the porch, one last time before bed, they stood together looking out at their land. The new schoolhouse frame stood skeletal against the sky, promise of tomorrow. Their garden lay ready for harvest, rows of plenty. The creek sang eternal, caring nothing for human drama, everything for continuity. "Good day," Eli said. "Good life," Maggie corrected. Inside, they prepared for bed with the easy rhythm of years together. Maggie brushed out her hair, still auburn but silvered at the temples. Eli wound the clock, as he did every night, keeping time for their family. In bed, they lay close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. Outside, an owl called. The wind whispered through grass with a sound like whispered gratitude. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "How that blizzard was the best thing that ever happened to me." "The blizzard, not me. The blizzard brought you. Can't separate the gift from the giving." She turned in his arms, kissed him soft and sure. "Then here's to blizzards, and to doors that open, to strangers who become family, to communities that learn to heal, to Owen Blackledge's donation buying books for children who'll never know his name, to forgiveness even when it's hard. To love, especially when it's easy. They settled into sleep. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, built something lasting from the ashes of old dreams, raised children in the shelter of shared strength. Outside, the night deepened. Stars wheeled overhead. Indifferent and eternal, the creek ran on, reliable as sunrise, and in a cabin that had grown from 1 room to 4, from shelter to home, from desperate beginning to peaceful ending, a family slept safe and whole. The door that had opened to a desperate knock in a blizzard remained strong, ready to open again for whoever might need shelter. But tonight, all was well. The harvest was coming. The school would rise. The community would endure. And in the morning, as always, there would be coffee and work and the quiet joy of chosen love continuing to choose itself, day after day, season after season, reliable as the creek that sang them all to sleep. Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West, where love grew from kindness and community, rose from ashes. If you're enjoying these tales of frontier romance and courage, please let us know where you're listening from. We love connecting with folks from all corners of the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Eli and Maggie's journey touched your heart? We'd love to hear your own family stories of unexpected beginnings and lasting love. Until next time, partners.